I think I'm going to go ahead and get going here, guys. Well, thank you everyone for joining me today. My name is Rob Noble, and I am the Commercial and New Homes Division Manager over here at myNHD. And please remember, at myNHD, we got you covered, guys. Whether it's for commercial disclosures, new home, residential sales, and also on your leases. Please remember us for all your disclosure needs. A little background on me. I have been in the NHD industry now for over 23 years, starting with subdivision and then residential. And then for the last 10 years, actually it's been 12 years now, I got to update that. 12 years now on the commercial side. And in that time, I've seen the disclosures required change quite a bit. Interestingly enough, though, is that commercial requirements have pretty much stayed the same since the law's inception. Since I've been on the commercial disclosure side of the NHD business, I've actually been surprised, excuse me, at how many times I've been asked if commercial sales require an NHD here in California. The answer is definitely yes, but let me take you through it a little bit. Slides were a little stuck there. So transactions requiring NHD reports here in California, well, that's really all real property sales transactions require the NHD reports in some manner. Includes a commercial, industrial, residential, which also includes mobile homes. A lot of people ask us about that. Mobile homes are definitely something that requires an NHD as well. Vacant land, farmland, basically anything that's a real property sales transaction here in California is going to require the NHD in some shape or manner. So when I've been asked that question by real estate attorneys or commercial brokers and agents, I always send them a couple things. And I'm, excuse me, I'm usually surprised at the questions I get from attorneys. You know, if they're outside the state of California, I get it. But I do get the question from attorneys here in California as well. So I send them a couple things. First is the California Bar Journal that was actually published when the law was written back in 1998. And it basically I highlight where it involves both residential and non-residential property, applies to all real estate transactions, include residential resales, new subdivision sales, and commercial property transactions, and that failure to make the required disclosure may render the seller or seller's agent liable for actual damages suffered by the buyer. Now, this is the attorney's newsletter, right? So this one really kind of hits home to them when they receive this and their question on whether something is mandatory or not. And then I also send them, and whether you use CAR or if you're using the AIR contract forms, I really love this sales disclosure chart from CAR. It basically lists, you know, residential 5+ units, vacant land, commercial. And since we're talking about that, that's the column I highlight. And then I highlight, you know, air potential flooding, earthquake zones, all the stuff that's required. And then I highlight the California Government Code, the California Civil Code, which is 1103, that basically all of these disclosures kind of fall under for the California real property disclosure codes. And then I send them that as well. And then if they still have questions, I have a couple more articles, but usually the California Bar Journal and also the sales disclosure chart from CAR usually answers, you know, anybody's questions on what's required and if it's mandatory to disclose on sales here in California on commercial properties. So for commercial sales in California, there are only 6 mandatory disclosures required by Civil Code, just 6. That has not changed over the 20+ years as residential disclosures has. You know, on the residential side of things, you got these new fire disclosures, AB 38, local disclosures on the fire zones that have been coming up. Commercial doesn't have any of those sort of requirements. These 6 mandatory state disclosures are exactly the same as residential's. It's just that residential sales requires more than just these 6. And California has kept these 6 as the only mandatory disclosures for the commercial sales. And then they really leave it up to the buyers to do their due diligence after that. Whether if they have a lender on the deal and that lender is going to require them to get a phase 1, do a site inspection, which is, you know, starts at a couple $1,000s and gets expensive. Now, does this mean just because these 6 mandatory disclosures, that's all you got to do? And that's all your clients may want to disclose to protect themselves from liability? No, right? You know, there's other stuff out there. There's lawsuits that happen, you know, for stuff that's not mandatory to disclose. And we want to make sure we're protecting our clients and your clients as well. So let me go through the mandatory stuff real quick in the interest of time, and then we'll talk about the other stuff. So the first one that's mandatory disclosure, your special flood hazard zone. And this is the one that everybody generally talks about. Well, these last couple of years, we've had these fire zones and a lot of fires, and that's kind of been top of mind for everybody right now. But, if it's in a flood zone or not, if there's going to be flood insurance that's required for that property, it's really been the big one. And this is a sample of what our mapping looks like. We love our aerial mapping, and then we use our parcel level data, and then you see the flood zone kind of coming over the property that's highlighted in green there. It's really clean, looks really good. Our clients love it. So this is based on 1% annual chance of being flooded with water, at least 1 foot deep from severe storms, often referred to as the 100-year flood zone. So if you're in a FEMA flood zone, the property and the property is going to require a mortgage to close escrow. The buyer may be required to purchase flood insurance, probably will be required to purchase flood insurance. So have your buyer contact their insurance company. And with anything that we're talking about here, if the buyer has questions, whether they want to know if they can build on the property or do things, and they got to contact the county or city, make sure that they're doing it, so you don't do it for them and maybe give them some information that they either misconstrue or is incorrect, that sort of thing. So always make sure your buyer's contacting the powers that be. So have them contact their insurance company and determine their insurance requirements and premiums. The next one is an area of potential flooding. And we get questions on this a lot too, because it's got that word flooding in it. And even though like the first one, the FEMA flood zone would say no, and then this one says yes, we get calls saying, hey, I'm not in a flood zone, you guys got it wrong. And we'll double check to make sure, but it's the word flooding that gets people sometimes. This doesn't have to do with flood insurance or a FEMA flood zone at all. This has to do with the area of potential flooding due to a dam failure. Now, potentials for dam failures are not high. I live in Riverside County, and Prado Dam almost flooded. It didn't almost flood, the dam almost failed about 12 years ago now, took out the whole golf course next to it. We thought it was really going to go. And it would have affected my property. And if the dam were, that water would have reached all the way to Long Beach. We've been in droughts for a lot of years. Right now, the reservoirs are full again, and our infrastructure, our dams are aging, so people could be worried about this if they see that their property is in a mapped zone due to a potential flooding to dam failure. Flood insurance is not going to be required by a lender. But if somebody is, oh my God, my commercial property that I'm thinking about buying is in this potential flooding zone, they can voluntarily go out and purchase the same sort of flood insurance that the FEMA flood zones require. It's just not going to be required by a lender. So it's going to be totally voluntary. So the second and third ones are your high fire zones. You got your high fire and your wildland fire zones. And they're both high fire zones, right? But it's really who's going to come put out the fire, In your high fire zones, you're going to be in your urban areas, which is, you're going to be your local fire department houses. And then the wildland areas, just like it sounds, it's going to be in the more rural areas. And that's going to be your Department of Forestry that are going to be charged with putting out those fires. Both areas have certain things that property owners must do. They got to keep, the tree limbs from within 10 feet of any stovepipes, chimneys, if there is any on the commercial property. Prune the tree limbs and clear leaves on the ground. It's basically taking care of that foliage. It's 100-foot clearance around the structures, what the state mandated stuff is. And on the residential sides with these new assembly bills, AB 38, they got to do much more. They got to do like defensible space stuff. They got to do home hardening, making sure that the vents and stuff are done right up in the eaves. Commercial it's not mandatory for that stuff. We don't even have to disclose it, but because we feel that this is probably going to apply to commercial here pretty soon, and because we want to protect our clients, we also put in our commercial reports the local disclosures that is required for residential. So that AB 38 is going to be listed in the commercial report as well. That local fire determination is going to be there because we want to make sure that our clients know about it, that you're protected from any liability from somebody saying, hey, why didn't you tell me about this local ordinance, these local maps? Not required by law, but we're going to protect you by putting it in our reports, our commercial reports. Very high fire hazard severity zones and wildland zones are basically delineated by assessing the vegetation, topography, dwelling density, and the climate of an area. Also, with all the floods that have happened because of the fires in the past, these maps are changing constantly right now. They used to be like on a 5-year kind of rotation for fire maps. They've been changing more and more due to the fires and the topography changes that have been going on out there. So just know that if you weren't in a fire zone before, you might be in a fire zone now, and vice versa. Although it's more, if you weren't, you probably, or could be in one now. It's kind of what we're seeing. So what to do if you're in one of these two fire zones? It may be definitely difficult for the buyer to obtain property insurance. This is something that is going on tremendously right now in our industry, whether it's commercial, new home, residential resales. Insurance is really becoming hard to come by here in California and in Florida and a couple other states. It may be difficult for the buyer to obtain the property insurance. I know Farmers and another couple big insurance companies just decided to stop writing policies here in California and actually canceled people's policies due to the fire zones. If you can get insurance, insurance is also going to be expensive. So have your buyer contact the insurance company to determine the insurance requirements and premiums. And if they are having problems getting that, there is a couple of resources. And the first is the California Fair Plan, which if you want to correlate it with like somebody that lost their employment and they get offered COBRA insurance, that's kind of what the California Fair Plan is for property insurance. We hear it's very expensive, like a COBRA kind of thing is for health insurance. But it is a route to take if somebody's having a problem obtaining insurance for a property they want to buy. We also have myIQuotes, and I don't have it here on the screen. I'll talk about it a little bit later. It's an insurance company that has been helping a lot of our clients get property insurance for their properties when they couldn't get it through regular means. And that's myIQuotes.com. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get closer to the end. We also have our earthquake fault zones, kind of across the bear here in California, right? This is, the East Coast has their hurricanes, the Midwest tornadoes, and, California and a little bit more of the West Coast. So we have our earthquake fault zones. They're all throughout California. They're hitting us all the time, whether we're feeling them or not. There's small ones, medium ones, large ones like the San Andreas, the famous one. It's just, we get questions about, what can we do about this? My clients, it's nervous about it. Not much really to say except to kind of tell them it's our cross to bear. This is, it's what we deal with here in California. If you're not in an earthquake fault zone, you're probably pretty close to one. I've seen the map of all of California. They crisscross the state. So they basically take, what they map out is fault rupture and fault creep. Fault rupture is when the ground instantaneously ruptures during an earthquake, and fault creep is when that happens over years and years of that, more earthquakes happening. They take that rupture and they take it and they go 500 feet wide on each side of it, and that's what they measure as the earthquake fault zone. What did they say? Active faults are faults that indicate surface rupture within the past 11,000 years, which sounds like a long time, but geologically speaking, that's just a blip on our radar. So you just got to kind of talk them through it if they're nervous about that. We also have landslide, and that's kind of our aerial mapping here. And then we also have liquefaction areas. These are both landslide and liquefaction, both having to do with earthquakes. What's going to happen with that soil? And you don't have to be on the slopes of Malibu for something to happen in a landslide zone, or in a sandy, on the beach for a liquefaction area. It's just basically what's going to happen with that soil. It can be a gradual slope. It could be the type of soils that the inland areas have, where there's saturated sandy soils. Where when an earthquake happens, is that structure going to slide, or is that structure going to sink because the ground is like quicksand like because it liquefies during an earthquake? So that's what landslide and liquefaction are mapped out for in relationship to an earthquake. Only 20 to 25% of the state has been mapped, however, and that's why on that signature form on residential and commercial, it's going to say, that's the only question that says yes, no, and map not yet available by the state. Riverside County was supposed to start like 12, 15 years ago. They still haven't started mapping it yet. They mapped out LA County, Orange County, I think a little bit of North San Diego County, and then parts of Ventura County. And the rest of the state has not been mapped out for liquefaction and landslide zones. So they're way behind, and whether that's due to, money or other reasons, not sure. But just know that that's why it's going to say map not yet available by the state. It's because the state hasn't mapped out those zones yet. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But what does it mean if you're in one of these zones, an earthquake fault zone, landslide, or liquefaction zones due to, due to an earthquake? Well, being in these zones can definitely affect new construction. Your buyer may not be able to build. And if they are, construction codes and costs may and probably will be significant. So again, have your buyer contact the city offices to find out the restrictions, see if they can build. We get questions about that all the time. Hey, I'm in an earthquake fault zone. I want to build an ADU, an extra dwelling or something on the property. It's vacant land. I want to build my commercial building. I'm in an earthquake fault zone. What does that mean? Well, you got to contact the city and county, and you got to find out, what their restrictions are. Every city and county, you're going to have different restrictions and different code things that they got to do. So it's really a question for the city and county. It's not something that we can answer. We just need to tell you if you're in one of these zones or not. So we also provide local city and county disclosures. And the reason why is really goes back to the state not being able to map out the liquefaction and landslide, number one. Heck, I think like 15 years ago, we couldn't even do business, almost 20 years ago now, I believe. Geez, time flies. We couldn't even do business in San Diego County unless we provided their local SANGIS mapping, which is liquefaction and landslide mapping for the county of San Diego. We had to provide that with every single one of our reports to do business in their county. And that's because the state hadn't mapped it out yet, right? And they still haven't. But there's lawsuits that have come up because of this stuff. Remember, there's only 6 mandatory disclosures, those first 6 that we talked about, that you must disclose for commercial properties. But there's other things that come up. What if they haven't mapped the liquefaction and landslide zones? What if they haven't mapped out, some other things? So a lot of cities and counties have taken it on themselves to go out and do their own mapping. You're going to see that the state has mapped out earthquake fault zone, and the city has mapped out an earthquake fault zone. And then sometimes the state's going to say one thing and the city's going to say another thing. So say the state says you're not in an earthquake fault zone, for an example, the city of Orange County could come in and say, oh no, you're in an earthquake fault zone. And then we get the question, of course, well, who's right? Well, we can't exactly say who's right. We definitely side on the local government because that is their own backyard. That is they're more invested, right? And that their mapping process is probably a little bit more, intact. They're invested in the process. So we definitely tend to side with the local government, but we mandatorily, civil code, we got to disclose what's required by the state and mapped out by the state. And then, the city and counties are also putting this stuff into their safety element of their general plan of their county. If that's so, then we're putting it in our report too. And there's a reason for that. We're gonna protect you from liability. We've heard lawsuits, and the judge basically has told the agent or the broker, you're the expert in this area. You either should have known about this local disclosure, or you should have used a third party like, myNHD that provides these local disclosures. And not all companies provide local disclosures. And if they do, they're not really, everything that they can be. So just, take a look at, the company that you're using and make sure that they have local disclosures, because even though it's not required by law here on the commercial side of things, it's going to protect you from liability in the end. I think Gov Hutchinson, who is the legal representation, the main legal guy for CAR, he always, oh God, I wish I could say the exact wording he uses, but over disclose protects you from liability. CYA, cover yourself, make sure that you are disclosing what is known out there, whether it's actual knowledge that you or the seller might know about, or a third-party provider that's providing all that's out there that provides what that property should be disclosing. So that's why we disclose everything. You don't want to create extra liability for yourself, so make sure you're using a company like us that provides the local city and county disclosures that are available. So just a quick couple little kind of visuals. This is San Bernardino County's flood map, which we use. Looks very similar to the FEMA federal flood zone mappings. If it's available, we're using it in our reports. And then you got the Orange County fire zones, and we talked about this a little bit. This is changing a lot, and this has been happening. We've been getting more and more phone calls about this because of insurance issues for properties, whether it's commercial or residential or new homes. The insurance company guys are using their own maps. We have to provide what the state has mapped out for commercial, and then the local zones, these new AB 38s, we're doing in our commercial reports too, making sure that you guys are covered all the way out. It's required for residential, but we're making sure we put in our commercial report. Even though we're putting what is in or out for these state and local zones, insurance companies are doing their own thing. And whether that's for their own liability processes or to make more money to raise the rates, we don't know. But a lot of times we're getting calls where, you know, you said I'm not in a fire zone, but my insurance company won't insure me because they say we are. And we'll double check our answers, and we'll double check that the maps are what they should be. And we're going to stick by what, you know, we're supposed to disclose. We can't do anything about what the insurance companies are doing right now. They are protecting themselves, and they are making sure that their liability is up to par. So they are going above and beyond the maps that we must disclose as an industry. So just know that could happen sometimes too. Hopefully it doesn't, but remember there are some resources if you are not able to get insurance for a property, whether it's the California Fair Plan or go to myiquotes.com. So what else do we include in our commercial report that's not mandatory to disclose? Even though it's mandatory to disclose on the residential side, is taxes, and especially pointing out if there's any Mello-Roos or 1915 bonds on that property. Mello-Roos and 1915 bonds are prevalent on the residential side, and they are very, very prevalent on the commercial side as well. And I wish this is what our property tax report looks like. I wish my property tax bill kind of looked like this as well. It breaks down every single thing very clearly. Starting with the county taxes, the ad valorem taxes, the percentage, and then all the assessments. The first one listed here is a Mello-Roos. It's going to highlight if it's a Mello-Roos. Sometimes they call them community facilities districts. You want to know if there's a Mello-Roos or a 1915 bond on a commercial property, just like on a residential property. Not mandatory to disclose, but we're going to do it in our reports. And there's a reason for that. If you are unable to pay your property taxes, there's a certain amount of time that the county has before they can start foreclosure proceedings. And that's 5 years. I usually, when I'm live in front of an audience, I'll ask it and throw out, little gifts and stuff, but we're virtual here. So it's 5 years before the county can start foreclosure proceedings. If there's a Mello-Roos or a 1915 bond on a property, there's something called an accelerated foreclosure notice on it, and they can start foreclosure proceedings within 180 days. That's pretty much the soonest I've seen these things. 180 days and 5 years is a huge difference for somebody that's having an issue paying their property taxes. So it's mandatory to disclose that on a residential disclosure report, but not on a commercial. We're going to do that automatically in our report. You're automatically going to get this tax report. We're going to tell you if it's in a Mello-Roos Community Facilities District or not, if it's got a 1915 bond. And if it is, then we also have this assessment document that goes into more detail because they do have these accelerated foreclosure notices, number one. Number two, it's going to tell you what the current levy is, what the maximum tax rate it can go up to in that time frame that bond is live, what the ending year is, and then also what it can go up each and every year, the maximum tax rate escalator, which is great information for a buyer of the property to know that, number one, hey, there's a Mello-Roos and a 1915 bond on the property. And number two, it can escalate 2%. I've seen up to 6%. I want to say I've seen up to 8%. That this can escalate every single year. So great information to have, even though it's not required by law. We're going to make sure that you guys are protected and the seller is giving this information to the buyer. And then what else can we give that is really good for commercial properties? And that's going to be the environmental disclosure report. It provides information about properties' proximity to a known environmental site. These are all found in public databases. This is very similar. Our report is very similar, I want to say, to what's found in a phase 1 report, which is called the historical record search. It's a database search. what's going on with that property and what's going on with that property within a mile radius. You know, depending on the database, they can be a quarter mile from the property, half mile, or 1 mile away from the property. Provides detailed information to the agents and buyers regarding that known environmental site in the area. And then an environmental screening report ordered by us in the sales process, early in the sales process, can provide the agent with any potential red flags on the sale of the property. Now, I would say almost all disclosure companies, except for us, they take the word commercial and they slap it on their residential report. And that's because their residential report is providing what's required by law. Those 6 state mandated hazards. That's it. That's all they have to do. They don't have to give you any local information. They don't have to give you any Melrose and tax information. They just have to give you that basic, residential report that's got the 7, environmental screening things on it. If you get that, and then that's it. That's not good enough for a commercial property, in our opinion, in my opinion. Our report is, like I said, similar to the historical record search. It's going to list 28 state and federal databases that either affect that property or surround that property, and are going to talk about it, whether it's a Superfund site, landfills, chemical companies, batteries, tires, oil wells, gas wells, high pressure pipelines, underground linking tanks, which is a big one. Environmental concerns on commercial properties are way higher than on an environmental kind of screening report for a residential property. And it should be. There's a lot more that goes into it. The buyers, down the line, if they get into escrow and have a lender, they're going to be required to get a phase 1 site inspection, which I said earlier is kind of expensive, a couple thousand people, $2,000. We like to call this like a pre-phase 1 kind of red flag report. This is something that you should be getting early in the deal. And you'll hear me say this maybe again. We love our escrow clients. They're very helpful. They'll say, hey, we'll order your disclosure reports, some other settlement service things for you. Give us your escrow, that type of thing. But this is something, a disclosure report is something that you should have at the time you get your listing. In all honesty, you should know if it's in a flood zone, if it's in a fire zone, if it's going to have insurance issues. Is the buyer going to have insurance issues? If, any of those other kind of mandatory things. But also the environmental part is huge to know up front. Is there anything affecting that property the buyer's going to be concerned about, or within a mile of that property the buyer's going to be concerned about? Know this stuff up front. There's no risk to you or your client if you order through our company. We don't charge cancellation fees. We don't come after you for the money. If you happen to lose your listing, that's unfortunate. We just want you guys to let us know so we can, kind of wipe it off our books. But we only get paid when you get paid. So why wouldn't you order this at the time you get your listing to kind of see the things that you're up against? And the reason for that too is this is a right of rescission document. They have 3 to 5 days to rescind their offer, the buyer does, based off of when they receive this disclosure report. And you don't want to blood, sweat, tears, money, all the time you spent getting this property into escrow, and then escrow, bless their hearts, orders the disclosure report for you. And that buyer either now has buyer's remorse and they can use this as a way to back out of the deal, or they see something that really worries them on the environmental site report, or in the flood zone, they didn't know it was close to a flood zone, or et cetera. Anything in here could worry them. And you don't want to wait that long. So get it early, get it in early in the process. You get your listing, make sure you know what's going on, make sure you talk about it with your seller. Make sure that the buyer's agent is talking to, if you're the buyer's agent, make sure you're talking to your client about what's in it. Do your due diligence as far as that goes. Do your duty to your client. That is what I mean. But definitely get this as early as you can. And we know that, some properties, especially on the commercial side of things, can go long, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year before it actually sells and gets into escrow. That's okay. Still get it at the time you get listing. When you get a buyer, get it at the time you get the listing, know what's going on, know things that you need to mitigate or talk about. When you get a buyer, just call us, email me, whatever, and just say, hey, can I get an update on this report number? free of charge. We'll double check everything again, rerun it through our systems, put a new date on it, and resend it out to you. And you'll have a brand new one. Whether something's changed or not, you'll have an update. But know the information about this property when you first get the listing. It's only going to help you in the end. It's going to, no surprises are going to come out. You don't want to lose a deal or have somebody back out of a deal because of an NHD report. Know the information up front, no risk to you and your clients. So again, we're the only company that provides this many environmental screening databases in our report. So make sure you're ordering the environmental section as well. This is the map that comes with it, which is a great resource, has a nice little legend on the bottom that's going to tell you what all the things are. I think this is in Long Beach. A lot of oil wells were listed here, all the green triangles, but a nice visual to kind of go through and see what's affecting the property. And if there is things that are within these radiuses, this is 1/4 mile, 1/2 mile, 1 mile in the yellow circles. Additional pages are in there going to talk about what those sites are, what the business is called, what the site ID number is, who to call if the buyer's got more questions or concerns about what's going on. And even if something's been closed or mediated out or it's been cleaned up, it's going to say it's been closed or cleaned up, but it's still going to stay in these databases because it had been monitored for an issue at one time in the past. And it's going to, that information is still going to be available to a buyer to see what was going on. If there was stuff that was in the groundwater or down in the soils that might, affect, the business or the commercial property that they want to buy. So who should order the NHD report? Well, it's actually the responsibility of the seller's agent to order the NHD report. This is a seller's responsibility. The seller's agent is on the hook to provide this information to a buyer, potential buyer. We therefore take the liability and know who you're doing business with. There's a lot of terms and conditions our competitors put out there that are basically saying that you can recoup the price that you paid for the report. So if you paid $123.95 for one of our competitors' reports and there was an error on their report, you could only recoup that $123.95. A lot of the competitors had changed their terms and conditions. So make sure, and I'm guilty too, don't always read terms and conditions. Make sure you're just knowing who you're in business with. We've been doing this for over 30 years. Our owner has been on top of this for over 30 years. We've never used our insurance. We do not require arbitration, mandatory arbitration. If we have an error mission, you come directly to us. We have, our that we've never used, very proud of that. Escrow officer, like I said, can order it, but please do this yourselves. No risk to your client. Just, give that invoice over to escrow when it opens and make sure they pay it and everything is copacetic after that. But know the red flags up front. If you represent the buyer, ask the listing agent for a copy. We provide a quick and easy way to order and receive this at our website at myNHD.com. It takes like 3 minutes to sign up and put your name in there, and then it saves everything. You can go in there and add escrow information down the line. You can order your report again if you lost it. You can ask for updates. We do this 24/7 too. We do this on the weekends. My mom's been an agent for 40 years. And believe me, I've scrambled to order her NHD report for her many times. We know that people, it gets forgotten sometimes. We know that stack of paperwork, we're not the most exciting thing that you are doing to put together, this stack of paperwork. But we're a mandatory part of it, and we are important, liability wise. So make sure you're getting it early, make sure that you are getting it, and we're here for you on the weekends if you need us. We have the combined hazard books, and our liability language protects all parties in the transaction. In black and white, it says buyer, seller, seller's agent, buyer's agent, broker, escrow, TC, anybody involved in the deal. It's listed in black and white that we protect them from liability. And we did deliver a separate invoice and signature page with the NHD report. And we're backed by our $10 million of insurance from a California company, which is Farmers, paid through escrow, no charge for canceled orders. Get it at the time you get your listing. Say it again. And it's $89.95 for our mandatory, that covers you report, but please get that environmental section. It's $20 more. It's worth it. For $109, you're going to know all the environmental issues that may affect that property up front before they got to go down and do a phase one down the line. Please call us at 800-814-2922. I gave you a website already, or you call, email me, or text me directly. I'm your resource for everything commercial and new home. Make sure you're reaching out to me if you need anything at all. Here's my contact information. Rob Noble, again, I've been doing this 23 years now, 23 and a half years now. When I first started, geez, the report was about, this big, about 6 pages. And some competitors, they're up to about 30, 35 pages. We're about 22 pages now for our commercial report. So things have changed. And like I said, a lot of the stuff that got added to the commercial because it's not mandatory are some of the local disclosures, mostly, and the tax information, because they're not required by law, but we want to protect you from any sort of any liability issues. So that's why we want to put it in there. And then if you didn't know, this is something new for us as well. If you're handling commercial leases, a lot of our clients ask for a lease report. Nobody else has one of these out there. It became mandatory on the residential side. So that's when we started hearing questions about it on the commercial side. And now on the residential side, it's mandatory to disclose if you're in a FEMA flood zone or a dam or possible dam flooding, dam inundation zone. We took it a step farther with commercial because we think it's more important. We basically list all 6, the FEMA flood zone, dam inundation, high fire, wildland fire, earthquake fault zone, liquefaction and landslide, and then also a water conserving fixtures advisory that CAR says we talk about for people that are leasing our commercial properties. Still cover about $10 million of E&O insurance. It's paid at the time of ordering though, so it is a credit card order because there's no escrow, right? So that is something that's paid at the time of order. Still 15 minutes or less, 6 pages with the 1 signature page, and still has all the aerial maps and interactive QR codes. It's going gangbusters. Those of you that are doing leases, I highly recommend it. And the reason why, it really protects your owners from any liability or from the tenants coming back and said, you didn't tell me I was in a fire zone. I would have got renter's insurance. You didn't tell me I was in a flood zone. I would have got some renter's insurance for my possessions. So it protects your owners from liability and informs those tenants by disclosing, the potential natural hazards that may affect the property and insurance rates. So I highly recommend it. If you're not doing it, then you're opening yourself up for it. It's $24, $25. I think it's well worth it. So please let me know if you have any questions on that too. And we do everything here to protect you guys from liability at myNHD. Whether it's residential sales, mobile homes, your commercial and industrial farmland disclosures, residential resale disclosures. We're your one-stop shop basically to protect you guys from liability. We've been here a long time. We're not going anywhere. We will protect you when it matters most. So if you need anything from myNHD, we will be here for you. With that, I'm going to finish up and just take any sort of questions. It looks like we got one from Kyle saying, would I share this deck later? I absolutely will share the deck, guys. If you commercial leases need myNHD, Mark, let me start with Kyle first. Yeah, if anybody wants to email me, and again, I'll go back and nope, just lost everything. So hold on just a second. Sorry, guys. Hopefully you can see that. It's not the full screen, but I will share the deck. So please just email me. Anybody that wants to get the deck, I will send it to them. And this is also going to be recorded. This whole thing was recorded. So if you want the recording, please let me know that as well. And I will send everything out to you guys tomorrow. I'm also available to do this one-on-one with your offices. I will specialize it to your office, whatever you guys need. And then Mark asked, do commercial leases need a myNHD? They don't need it. It's not mandatory, Mark. It's just something that a lot of our commercial clients ask for. It's only mandatory on the excuse me, on the residential side of things. But on the commercial side, it's not, but it's a really good idea. And we took it, a couple steps farther to give you more disclosures on it. And can I send you the presentation? Yeah, Jason, just send me an email because I can't see anybody's emails on here. So if you just send me an email, I'll take care of it for you. I want to thank everybody for joining. We went 42 minutes, so hopefully I didn't put anybody to sleep. I didn't hear any snoring, so I know you're on mute, so but whatever. Please let me know if you don't want to ask a question right now. Please go ahead and shoot me an email or give me a call, and I'll take care of you guys personally. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close it out. Thank you guys so much. Please remember myNHD for all your needs, and let me know if you need anything. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.